Well, it's all your fault. If I'm not sleeping, I live on dreams instead of eating. I'm just a wreck, and it's all your fault. And it's all your fault if I'm not playing and having fun. And if I'm staying at home alone, well, it's all your fault. Now, when you said that we were through, I tried to find somebody new. But I found out that wouldn't do, 'cause I'd rather be alone than with somebody new. And it's all your fault when I'm a grandpa if my grandkids don't call you grandma. We'll just tell them that it's all your fault. When you said that we were through, I tried to find somebody new. But I found out that wouldn't do, 'cause I'd rather be alone than with somebody new. And it's all your fault when I'm a grandpa if my grandkids don't call you grandma. We'll just tell them that it's all your fault. Hi, this is Matt Munisteri for Peghead Nation. We're going to talk about this beautiful instrument that I have with me today. I've now owned this instrument for, I guess it's 5 days, but who's counting? This, like a lot of the best instruments that I own, came into my life when I wasn't looking at all. I really thought I'd never buy another archtop, especially an acoustic archtop guitar. I already have not just an embarrassment of riches, but a humiliation. But this guitar, a friend of mine has a shop, and this guitar walked in the door one day, shortly before I walked in the door, and I was floored. It's a 1949 Gibson L-5. So this guitar has some special features that are a little unusual for an L-5. It's an L-5N. It's a natural finish. It's got some really interesting, nice wood. I don't know if you can see. The sides have a fair amount of bird's eye on them. It's a little psychedelic and trippy, honestly. And the back has a fair amount of bird's eye, which is nice. It's just a grain to the maple. Medium flame on the neck. But this is a thin top guitar, and this was a feature that Gibson ordered for a special orders. But nowhere in here does it have an S on the label that would indicate that it was a special order. And they didn't do that apparently with the thin tops. But the way of telling, outside of actually using a gauge, is the bridge base. So the base of this bridge is noticeably thinner than the base of bridges on other archtop guitars of mine. It's quite a bit thinner than the base of the bridge on my L7, which is basically the same year. My L7 is a 48. It also has the old script, and it's thinner than that. So I got this from my good friends at T.R. Crandall Guitars, and Tom Crandall went and got a gauge that he has that's got magnets on either side and measured it, and he was like, yeah, the top is consistently a 1/16 of an inch thinner than the tops on his other vintage Gibson archtops. I don't know the exact years that they were offering this, but from what I've read, this was something that they did to try to approximate the sound of the early L5s, the 16-inch L5s, of which I have two, and I'm a big fan. I don't think it really does that. But I think that the flat top and the thin top, and I've played a couple of thin tops. I think that they're a little more responsive. So they just sort of immediately kind of give it up. What they don't do as much as the thick tops is they don't have quite the same power when you're doing rhythm playing like this. It's pretty sounding and it has a thunk to it, which I want. It has like a meaty quality. It's not brittle, but the thicker tops tend to like send that out. But the thicker tops are also more difficult to get a sound out of. You have to hit them a little harder. This, I'm barely touching it. And it has... It still has the tonal quality that it would have if you hit it harder. And it also, it just speaks really quickly. It's a beautiful feeling neck. The other features on this that are kind of unusual, and that at first when I saw it, I was like, oh, that just looks weird. It has a rosewood board. This is something that Gibson was doing during the Depression for a few years, I think in the late 30s. But this is the late 40s. It shipped in January 49, so it's probably, made in 48. It also has the old Gibson script, the pre-war script. And it's pretty late to have that. But I grew up with an L7, a 1948 L7 that also has that I got when I was 12. That was my main guitar from 12 to 34, 33. I had a good run with it. I still own it. It's a great guitar. This is kind of like that, but it's got a much friendlier neck. The neck is not exactly slim, but really, really comfortable. One feature on these that's really nice is that the finish is so thin that in addition to being able to feel and see the grain on the top, you can see on the back of the neck where someone's thumb and fingers have just worn away enough of the finish so that it's basic bare wood, but it's like wood that has just a slight matte finish on it, and that's incredibly comfortable. Anyway, so rosewood board instead of ebony board, rosewood bridge instead of ebony bridge, and original pickguard, which is also unusual. And it's unusual to see a black one. I don't know what the story is with this, but usually they're tortoiseshell. This is black. It has no warping at all. It's like perfect. So go figure. Anyway, so on day 5 now of owning this guitar, I'm kind of thrilled. I put a DeArmond Rhythm Chief on here, a little floating pickup for a concert a couple of days ago, and it sounded great. So the 16 versus 17-inch guitars are interesting. The 1920s L5s that basically were in production through the early 30s have a 16-inch lower bout instead of 17. They also are a shorter scale. One of the things that I do really like about the 16-inch guitars is they're just comfortable. The scale is 24 and 0.9, almost 25, from the bridge to the nut. These are 25 and a half. So you can imagine the top is being driven a little harder with the longer scale. To get the same gauge strings to the same pitch, they have to be pulled tighter. So these tend to be a little bit more aggressive sounding. The short scale instruments, the 16-inch L5s, often have a little more bass. But these also, because they're being driven and they're under such tension, they also have a great projection. And that's really, these guitars evolved at the sort of dawn of the big band era. In the 1920s, the guitar was replacing the banjo. So again, it was big bands, but it wasn't the swing era where the guitar's role really became super defined. And the guitars if you've taken the Roots of Jazz guitar class at all, and you've listened to a lot of the early jazz guitarists in the 1920s and early 30s, they're not just chugging straight fours. They're playing lines. They're doing all kinds of other things that are kind of more intimate. In the hands of Eddie Lang and Nick Lucas, the guitar became a specialty instrument for backing up vocalists. So these instruments, it's less common to hear players play single lines on them. There are exceptions. I think Dick McDonough probably used a long scale at some point, and Carl Kress famously used a long scale. And by the time you get to the late 30s, everyone's using long scale instruments. But really, they're designed to do that, like. And this one has a sweet sound. It's got a really nice, I think, like woof in there. I have electric strings on here, by the way. I have round core Monel strings. They're not the loudest strings, but I just like the tonal quality that it does. And you know, for me, this is not as loud a guitar as my best 16-inch L5, but it has that woof that's really nice, and it has a super, super even thing. So this is something that my 16-inch guitars do not have. This has, to my ears, all the way down at the bottom to the top. It has an even sound and a kind of like round, focused quality. My 16-inch L5s are both a little bit more aggressive. I would probably use those more for playing like single line gigs, that kind of thing. They also, just on purely practical grounds, my L5 has a wider nut and a wider board. It's like a 1 3/4 nut, and the board stays pretty wide down here. And so your standard Diarman pickup, your older Diarman pickup, or a standard, even like a modern pickup, would have the pole pieces not matching the strings. And by the time you get to the late 30s, you've got what became the kind of industry standard right down here for Diarman pickups. And so all the pole pieces fit like perfectly under the string. So this is a really good instrument to amplify. The other reason why it's really good to amplify is because it's so even. So the one gig that I just did this concert a couple of nights ago, and there weren't like the hot spot notes. Nothing suddenly jumped out. It was nice and even throughout. So the combination of that and a super comfortable neck and a beautiful round sound that's a little less aggressive than the 16-inch, it's got a place. It's got a place in my heart. It's got a place in my arsenal. It's certainly something that I've got a fair amount of work situations where this is going to be the right tool for the job.